Good morning, everybody. All the way back there. I think I can still say this, that compared to most people in this room, I'm still pretty new to this effort. I spent most of my professional life as a journalist, and I think an interest in education as a journalist is partly what led me down this rabbit hole. And I think it's understanding or coming to understand three things. And number one is that much of what's happening in public education, in our public education system, is frankly shocking. And number two, that journalism, I think, too often applies this false equivalency to the debates around education, and that more often than not, it's not gray. It's a question of right and wrong. And number three, this to me is the most important story happening in this country right now, and it needs to be told from the perspective of the stakeholders and the people who are fighting for them. Today, I run a nonprofit, as Mike mentioned, that is helping some families, some stakeholders in New York, bring a lawsuit very similar to the one in California, the Vergara case, challenging teacher tenure laws, dismissal protections, and last in, first out seniority rules. And these parents are doing this because they have such a sense of urgency in them that's driving them, because they cannot wait another day, another minute for their kids to have good schools. The two men who I'm going to welcome on the stage, who I know personally and have known for a while, so it's an honor to be able to interview them, share that sense of urgency. It infuses everything they do. They have riveting stories, too, that I think they're going to share with you today, as well as the lessons they've learned in trying to accomplish what they have accomplished. In every day and what they do, they defy worn-out claims that children in poverty can't learn, that children of color can't learn, that these factors are more important than the quality of teaching or the culture of the schools. And they prove that when you unshackle great leaders, that anything is possible and that they can do really extraordinary things. So let me welcome right now Andy Malone and Patrick Dobard. So let me tell you a little bit more about these guys. I'm going to start with Patrick. Patrick is the superintendent of the New Orleans Recovery School District. He's a New Orleans native, and Patrick and I just discovered that we spent a lot of time in the same very, very small town in Louisiana. He is a 24-year career educator, started out as a social studies teacher in New Orleans. In January of 2012, Patrick was named superintendent, and his work prior to this appointment led to many systems-level changes that have allowed the Recovery School District schools in New Orleans since 2007, this is amazing, these statistics are amazing, see the percentage of students in those schools at grade level more than double, from 23% to 57%. And the percentage of students attending a failing public school in New Orleans decreased from 65% in 2008 to 5% in 2014. So Andy is the principal of Success Academy Harlem Central, which is one of the highest performing public charter schools in New York City. He also serves as the lead middle school principal for the Success Charter Network, which, full disclosure, I'm on the board of. So I'm especially proud of Andy. Before joining Success, Andy taught with the 2008 Teach for America Mississippi Delta Corps. He has a BA in American History from Harvard and an MA in Education Leadership from Columbia. And he is the recipient of Harvard's Jonathan W. Levin Prize for Teaching and Social Justice. So, you know, they both have incredible stories to tell, as I mentioned earlier. And Patrick, why don't I start with you? Tell people first what New Orleans schools were like 9 years ago.
Yes, so thank you, Campbell. So 9 years ago, and really before that, Just think about just a public school system that was in total dysfunction, school board pre-Katrina for literally decades that had not performed at any level that any of us would be proud of. And the one example that we usually give about New Orleans schools before the storm, we had a public high school graduate, or about to graduate, and this young lady was the valedictorian of her high school in New Orleans, but she could not pass the state minimum skills test that she had taken 7 times in mathematics in order to earn her diploma. And so this test, mind you, was also written at about the 8.5 to 9th grade level, which most of our sophomores would take. So she's had multiple times to take it. And that unfortunate and really tragic incident was one of like the final straws that was broken to say, you know what, we have to really do something different. So we had it was just a horrific system of schools that didn't put the interests of children first, and it magnified itself in this young lady's unfortunate experience.
And take us 9 years to today.
So,
I mean, those statistics are amazing, and you have more data points that prove how much things have changed and how much better it's gotten.
Absolutely. So today, we have a decentralized system of schools in New Orleans where we have 64 schools. It's the first all-charter district in the nation. We didn't set out to do that. What we set out to do was to make certain that we had a system of schools that was grounded in really 3 core principles. So one is autonomy, so autonomy for school leaders to be able to make decisions around hiring and firing, to make decisions around transportation, make decisions around food services. Just literally think of each school or each system of schools within that as their own school district. And the strongest thing about the autonomy part is that they have to go through such a rigorous process to be approved as a charter in Louisiana, whereas they're screened by an independent third entity. They're then approved by the state board. And we've really empowered leaders, and it's not like cliche-ish for us. It's a literal transformation when you see that 23% of students, when we started this, were at a proficient level. Today, over 60%, or almost 60%. And so that autonomy is something that is a core centerpiece. But with that, it's accountability. And so we have our schools that are in contracts with us, in essence. And in every 4 to 5 years, they're up for review. And if you have not met the minimum bars that we've established across the criteria, you lose your privilege after that by not getting your contract renewed to continue educating kids. So in New Orleans, to educate young people, it's not like a guaranteed right. It's not something that's an institution that you're going to be in it for just decades regardless of your results. You're literally in business of educating our kids by being held to this standard. And we've been very strong in holding that standard, and I think that's been the cornerstone of why we've been able to move from just a really awful school system or system of schools to we're good. And I don't want to oversell this. We're not at a place where we have all A schools or all B schools. This is not some magical thing that's going on. This is like hard work when you're talking about our students are the most disadvantaged and significantly behind students. Just about every student that was in Recovery School District schools since 2007 were at least on average 2 or 3 grade levels behind. So we're not talking about some of the top students that you're just trying to move along. We're talking about some of the lowest performing students, and this has been generational. And then the third thing, community. One of the biggest criticisms we received was that we've done reform to community and not with community. And there was a sense of urgency right after the storm, and I was part of that we can't wait, and we have to do some things without getting the blessings and having time for a lot of meetings. But at the same time, knowing that our intent was around really changing and transforming schools and the lives of children, we've learned over the years that we can have much more community involvement. I'll talk about that more later, but there's a way to do it with some balance and some respect of our communities, while at the same time not compromising on our principles. So I would think that for all the successes we've seen, we have just so many great proof points for our high school students. Our cohort graduation rate hovered around the mid-40s maybe, or 50s, and today it's almost steady at close to 75%. Now we want to get to 100%, but again, you're talking about students that might be at a collegiate academy in New Orleans who starts 9th grade at the 5th or 6th grade level. And these kids are getting into college, first generation, and they're graduating in 4 years. I mean, that's phenomenal work. But at the same time, we have to continue to figure out ways to replicate that and move that along at a much faster pace, because there's this urgency around how we're going to serve our kids continuously.
So Andy, you have had quite a year.
Yes.
And not everybody in the room probably knows the story of what happened to you and to your school and to your kids, which was that our mayor, Bill de Blasio in New York, essentially made a decision that was going to shut down Andy's school. Walk us through what happened when you found out. Just kind of tell people the story a little bit.
Sure. First, I have to say that I'm just very excited and humbled to be here. This conference has been amazing, so thank you, Governor Bush, and I'm very happy to speak to you this morning. A little bit about Success Academy. So we are a large charter network in New York City. We are 32 schools this year, which is a lot. And our collective student body is 86% minority and 82% free reduced lunch. On this year's state exams, every single tested school was in the top 1% for math and the top 3% for ELA in New York State. So we, thank you. So my school, Harlem Central, is one small part of that equation, but it's a 5th through 7th grade middle school, and it is my most cherished project ever. So this February, February 27th, it was a Thursday, I was observing a 5th grade math lesson, and I got a call from Eva, who is our founder and CEO. So I took the call, obviously. And usually when Eva calls, it starts something like, Andy, what's up with your science data? Andy, your bulletin boards are not bright enough. Something is amiss. So, but this call started a little bit differently. And she said, Andy, are you sitting down? And so I knew something was wrong. So I sat down and I said, I am now. And she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the mayor is trying to shut you down. And I had no idea what she could possibly be talking about. What she was talking about was an announcement that the mayor had made that morning revoking our shared space agreement for the coming school year. So in New York, most charter schools, and actually most district schools, are co-located, which means that they share space in large public buildings. Now, Mayor Bloomberg, before he left office, had approved a permanent home, a co-located home for my middle school, a few blocks away from the feeder elementary. And then, on February 27th, Mayor de Blasio announced that he was rescinding this agreement and that we would no longer have that home. And in addition, there was no plan or proposal for where we would be relocated. And for it to be nearly March, basically we were handed an impossible situation, which was to find and pay for a private building in Manhattan in which we could continue operating. So it really did feel like just an effort to shut us down. And moreover, the deadline for parents to apply for other city middle schools had already passed. And so if families wanted to apply to other charters or other neighborhood schools, it was no longer an option. And so all of our students would have to go back to their zone schools, the majority of which have literally single-digit proficiency rates on their state exams compared to our results. So this was, I mean, really nothing short of a tragedy for the school community. For me personally, and for the families and the kids, it was so devastating. I taught every student in the building when they were in 4th grade, and I followed them up to be their middle school principal. So I have been with these families and kids going on 4 years, and now all of a sudden there's this very real threat that we wouldn't be able to stay together in the coming year. It's hard to capture what that feels like, especially when the other option for these families it's actually not an option at all. Every morning I stand outside the building and I shake every kid's hand as they come in. And even though in New York that can be a very chilly endeavor, it is always the favorite part of my day. After that announcement, it was almost unbearable to do that because for the first time I had to shake 124 kids' hands, all of whom I loved, and worry for the first time that they would not have a good school the next year. And then by extension, I was nervous about their long-term trajectory. It was very, very painful, and parents were always calling and what was going to happen, and the teachers are coming to my office tearful, and it was just terrible.
And I'm going to pause you just for a second. It was a moment, too, when people who aren't really a part of this debate normally became engaged because they couldn't believe that talk about your kids specifically at your school and what their scores were. And,
yes.
so people who didn't understand charter schools, weren't part of the conversation, suddenly were faced with this reality that this school, these kids were being shut down, and it just made no sense to anyone. It got a lot of new people into the fight.
Yeah, so exactly. You know, personally, I'm devastated, but professionally, I'm shocked. Because as an educator who considers himself very committed to quality schooling across the country, this decision was, I think, terrifying for the sector in New York. You know, my 5th grade cohort in 2013 had the highest pass rate in New York State for math proficiency, better than gifted schools like Anderson, and we're a non-selective school. In 2012, my 2 cohorts collectively were ranked #1 in the borough of Manhattan for academic performance overall. 100% of the kids scored advanced on their science exam. I mean, I really could go on, but this is a school that is working. And what you can't see is that it's also joyful, and it includes arts and electives and all these other factors. So for the city to target us when there are over 300 schools in which fewer than 10% of kids are passing their exams, that's 143,000 kids trapped in failing institutions, that we would have to fight for space was unfathomable. And it was very scary and very frustrating, I guess, is too small a word, as a professional in the field, to think that school quality and school outcome was not driving the decisions made about schools in the city. So it was a terrifying moment in that regard, too. Ultimately, however, I think it turned...
It ends well.
It ends well.
We promise. There's a happy ending.
Yeah. It ends with a beautiful 4-story building. But the way it got there was... there was an incredible demonstration of will and support on behalf of many, many, many people in defense of Central and in defense of choice and quality. So, you know, 11,000 parents and kids marched on Albany that next month in support of the charter sector and school choice. It was an incredible political demonstration. Our governor and many, many state lawmakers very quickly assembled a historic legislative package which basically said that if the state authorizes a charter in New York City, then the city is responsible either for providing public space or paying for private space. You cannot strand the school as Central had been stranded. That was nationally, that had never been done before. And I think, you know, beyond even the immediate city, we got so much support from reformers like you, whether it was signing petitions or speaking up or writing, emailing me personally, talking to Eva. All of that mattered so much, and I think, you know, as most tragedies will reveal, that there is strength and cohesion and, you know, I would call it political will. I would also call it a moral will as well to come out in behalf of what was right for kids. And, you know, while I have the mic, I have to say thank you to everybody who came out and salvaged Central. You know, this is my baby. This is a school that I have cherished and worked hard to build for kids that I care about, and I almost lost it. And I am so grateful for the advocates who came out and defended us. And the second thing I would say is I hope we carry the momentum forward, because it's not just that great schools are being shut down, it's that failing schools are being allowed to persist, and there's opportunity to open other great institutions of learning on behalf of America's kids. And I just think that the collective dedication we saw this past spring with Central should be replicated and strengthened if we really are to create the change that is deserved by the students of the country. So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask, I mean, Andy just walked us through one of the biggest challenges he has faced in his life. I think it's probably fair to say.
It's very fair to say.
And there are political challenges, and then there are other kinds of challenges that you guys are both going through. And that was a political challenge. There's no question about it. And they continue for Success Academies. I should say our comptroller now has decided he's going to audit our schools as opposed to actually auditing the failing schools. It's nonstop. I want to get into the other challenges in a second, but first, Patrick, talk to us a little bit about your political challenges and how you deal with it.
So I think our political challenges, they're a bit different, but there's some similarities. So where they're different is that, you know, in 2003, our legislature had the wisdom to create a recovery school district with a focus on schools that were chronically underperforming and failing for 4 consecutive years, meaning if you hit that unfortunate threshold, you would be placed into the recovery school district. And in 2005, with the unfortunate incident, not to say lightly, catastrophe of Katrina, we literally and figuratively were able to rebuild our school system. And the law, I think the most important thing, the policy, is the law that was implemented, which gave the RSD and the state superintendent the authority to be able to authorize through the state board to open schools, but yet also have the measures to be able to close them when they don't perform well. It gave us really the opportunity from a political perspective to lean on that heavily. And so we're able to say, this is the law that you've created, and it's good for kids. Like, who would want their child to be in a school that's been chronically underperforming? And who would not want to close those schools or have the ability to close them and replace them with much stronger leaders, much stronger teachers? And I think at the core of it, it's that underlying value system that has helped us to continue to move forward. That's not to say you don't face political challenges, but I think at the same time, it's really grounded in like our belief, that a true belief that all children can learn at a high level, and our laws and policies support that. And so when you face the critics, and I think the biggest thing is that our critics from a political perspective has usually been around, they just want to point out criticisms in the areas where they don't see successes, or they might feel like success is not moving fast enough or even like clear enough. But they rarely come to the table with solutions. And so we try to deal with folks on just like, you have to be solutions oriented. You know, so if you're telling me like what you don't believe in or why you don't think things are working, we also want you to come and tell us like, what's the solution sets that you believe in? What's the solution sets that you think are going to make this better? And so, you know, we've gotten criticisms in areas around, let's just say, expulsion work for students, expulsions of students, where we had a very high expulsion rates in some of our schools, or suspension rates were very high. And we had one group with some, just, I guess, local political pressure, where they were protesting at the school last year, a few schools, a network of schools, and they really, it was a challenging time because from the RSD's perspective, we had looked at like discipline and discipline policies would be an infringement on the school's autonomy. So we were wrestling with, as government, how do we intervene in that? How do we handle the politics of, you see folks protesting outside of schools, and these schools have some high expulsion and suspension rates. Well, what we did was we convened all of our school leaders, as we always do. We talked about what the issue were, and they all agreed that we needed to reduce the expulsion rate. And so we used that to create an expulsion hearing office where we're able to like police and make certain that schools are following their policies. And it's working very well, where we've seen expulsions just significantly drop. But also with that, the political pressure that they were putting on these schools around suspensions, we actually met with them because we felt like they had a valid argument around it. And I'm glad to say that last year, this one school had over 60-something% suspension rate for their kids. I mean, it was very high, but it's one of the same schools that had 100% of their kids graduating and getting into college. So it was where the academics and the discipline policies weren't really lining up, right? And this year, they met over the summer. And with the activists and the political powers that be in that situation. And what happened is that they came upon restorative justice practices that the school learned about. They've implemented it to a way that it even shocked the activists when they came into the school. They're like, are you serious? Is this real? You dedicated this to this? And today, they have 0 expulsions, and they have 0 suspensions at this one school, and the other 2 network schools have less than 5% suspensions. And what it was, it's a matter of, okay, again, you can try to put political pressure on me, and it may work to the sense that it's elevated, but at the same time, if you don't come with solutions, you know, we're just going to keep fighting for the right thing for kids and serve them. So that's just one more recent thing that we've had where we've seen some political pressure, but we were able to really solve for the problem and not make this a thing of where it has to be a lot of either ors, it's a lot of ands. So we can have autonomy, and we can improve our expulsion and suspension policies, and whatever the next thing may be, we'll work towards that.
You know, in the context of sort of the theme of our conversation, the civil rights issue of our time, you know, what you're up against often is this constant refrain of kids in poverty can't learn. We have to solve poverty first before we can do this. And Andy, I mean, clearly you disproved that at your school and at a lot of the other ones. What is the hardest part? Like, what is your biggest challenge in getting to where you are in terms of achievement? Like, what's the secret sauce? How do you do it?
Everyone always asks, what is the secret sauce? I think I actually want to draw a parallel between what happened this spring and answering that question. You know, there are a number of specific things going on with our curriculum and the way that our schools are structured that I think really accelerate student learning. But I don't think that any of them are the secret sauce necessarily. I think that what sets success apart and what enables the results is that we have the same kind of will that you saw in Albany or that you saw throughout this spring. That is not only happening outside of the walls of the schools, it's also happening within it. And so we expect that parents and kids and teachers and leaders operate with an incredible dedication and commitment and drive to make the schools unbelievable. And we manage against that standard, both ourselves and our people. So that's very challenging, but that is what I think makes the schools successful. We have this incredible, totally irrational dream of what school should be. You know, I run a middle school. Everybody hates middle school. Everybody walks in saying, middle school was the worst time of my life. Middle schoolers are terrible. After 5th grade, they turn into these angsty beasts, and they're very unpleasant. So the first thing I say to my staff every summer is, I need you to forget and reject everything you think you know about middle school and middle schoolers, because this middle school is going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and they're going to learn an incredible amount, and they're going to love school every day. And if they don't, it's going to be a problem, and we're going to stop, we're going to fix it. That attitude is happening across all of the schools. So I think that expecting adults to lead children in that manner to that standard is what makes success the success that it is.
Patrick kind of addressed the same question about, you know, the extraordinary percentages, the percentage growth that we mentioned earlier. What's the secret to it?
I think the secret is, if we want to call it that, it's like great leaders, I mean really strong leaders, and like great teachers. And I know we say that a lot, but you can't underscore enough how important that is. And so like literally after Katrina, we actually had like such an energy and talent infusion into the city. We had some of the best and brightest that were wanting from almost like a civil rights like issue, like we have to go and protect and serve these children, and also just like a professional calling. And so when you have that drive and that sense of urgency, you know, our school leaders, they're able to work in a space where they don't have to focus on a lot of the I guess like the external type things, the politics. They can really focus on how can I make my school better? How can I improve delivery? How can I improve instruction? How can I be diversified in what I'm doing? If there's a blended learning model, if I want to do a career education focus, that they have that ability, and that's something, you know, that they didn't foresee from a government perspective or a central office perspective will stop that. So being able to plan and follow through on that with consistency, I think, has really strengthened our leadership, as well as the teachers. I mean, we have a diverse array of teachers from various sectors, and the majority of our teachers are very strong, and we need to get stronger. We will get stronger, but at the same time, they have the freedom and the ability to make decisions within their schools that otherwise they may not have in other places. And I think the biggest thing is that there's this sense of urgency and commitment. And then also, really, they're working for their livelihoods. Because when you think about it, everyone's under basically a contract to deliver. And so when you have like that basic internal drive, I want to do this. When you have like the moral imperative, you know, I'm serving young people, and this is something that's going to help our nation grow stronger and be greater. But then you also have that very personal, you know, I need to make sure I can take care of my family. I need to be very good in my profession. When you have that and you know I have to get from point A to point B, but it's very reasonable, and like who wouldn't want to see growth, because this should be the largest growth industry, right? Educating our kids. That has become a great, like what I would call like the secret sauce, right? It's about those motivators. I mean, we can get like deep into the weeds and talk more specifics around like how the instruction is delivered and that sort of thing. But at its essence, at its core, you have to have those strong, great leaders. You have to have strong teachers with this belief in a system that allows them to be the great professionals we know that they can be.
So there's been, you know, as part of the conversation yesterday, talk about how little has been accomplished since Brown v. Board. you know, in many ways. But look, for you guys who have managed to do a lot, look 10 years out. What does it look like, and what do you want to do or try to do?
So I'll go. So, you know, I was saying New Orleans, you know, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Katrina, and I look at our school system, our system of schools, it was like this critical needs patient. And right after the storm, we were doing triage. We were just trying to stop the bleeding. And we did that. And we did some things to immediately get these schools into much better health condition. So we're, I think, you know, if we want to use, you know, we're football, you know, we're kind of like at halftime. You know, this thing is a large thing to try to turn around. And so we still have 2 more full quarters to go. And those 2 full quarters are over like the next 10 to 15 years. And so the first 10 years, we really focused strong on, again, autonomy, accountability, and looking at, you know, really creating excellence in our framework. And now we're focusing on equity. So over the next 10 years, and when you talk about civil rights, I would argue that in this country, like the Recovery School District in Louisiana, we've done more to protect the civil rights of students over the last 10 years, arguably, than anywhere in this country. And the things that I would point to is that, one, we have now a centralized enrollment system where we have all of our schools except for 9 in the city of New Orleans, whether they're under the governance of the RSD or of the Orleans Parish School Board, that are in a central enrollment system to guarantee that no one is cherry-picking students, no one's pushing kids out, kids aren't freely just transferring. So that's equity for all kids. We also just this year opened the Youth Opportunity Center to focus on our most truant youth. And so we're focusing on chronically absent students, trying to get them off of the street and coordinating better with all of our city services and state services. Thirdly, we're opening a therapeutic setting for students this fall, where we're going to focus on some of our most severely emotionally and behaviorally disturbed students and try to give them a better space. We're creating specialty schools for students with special education needs, and really a diverse array of delivery and services around equity. Because we can have the excellence from the academic standpoint when you think just general ed, but we also need equity to make sure that we continue to serve our most impoverished students, our students with significant disabilities, and then also we're having a much larger influx of ELL students. And so we want to be focusing on how can we serve all of these students in an equitable way. It's not any longer a system of have and have-nots. I would say those schools that aren't in our central enrollment system are the select admission pre-Katrina schools, the majority of them, where they don't feel comfortable that we could control for that to make certain that they receive or have access to the type of students, even though they're public schools, that they would want to educate. And we're saying you can have all of that. You can be a select admission school, a magnet school, and still participate in this enrollment system. And so we as government, I think over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to continue to push for more equity throughout our system, continue to push for the higher excellence, and then thirdly with that, bring in the community continuously. We have to serve the community well, but the challenge is also, you know, unfortunately, many of our parents, for the students that are in our schools, again, the most significantly impoverished and critically impaired in the sense of being behind, the parents, the moms, the grandmoms, and sometimes the great-grandmoms, the majority were educated in schools where the valedictorian, unfortunately, couldn't pass the state minimum skills test. And so when you think, if you have like 3 generations that were failed by a public system of schools, to move into a place where you're getting higher academic performance, ensuring equity for all kids, and have that community involvement that's well-informed, it's a challenge because you're dealing with sometimes 30, 40, 50, and in the case of Brown, 60 years of things that weren't equitable. And so it's a matter of us understanding where we were when we started what we did 10 years ago in New Orleans, not to have these expectations that are just out of the roof and saying that, you know, we're going to do this and this and that, but being very deliberate about we know these core areas that we have to focus on in order to be, I think, you know, a great system of schools in the next 10 to 15 years.
10 years out, I would like Harlem Central to be the undisputed best middle school on the planet. I say that not jokingly. For me, you know, I have a very clear vision of what that means to me. It means that every 8th grader has the critical thinking skills on par with the nation's elite. It means that every 8th grader has had 4 years to explore different passions, talents, and interests, and to develop at least one of them to a competitive level. And it means that through their 4 years of middle schooling, they have developed the habits of successful individuals, goal setting, self-discipline, and also deeply moral sense of how you make decisions and treat others. So in 10 years, I would like Central to be doing that very consistently and very well. I also love my job, and I think that school leadership, and I'm biased, but I think that school leadership is the lever. I think that any policy, any idea, any dream is only as good as it is managed on the ground in the context of the school building. And so I would like to contribute to efforts to help train principals ongoing, through my experience and learning from them, but just to make sure that the leaders of schools in the country can manage against their wildest dreams effectively.
We're going to go to questions, and we just have a few more minutes. So let me ask you, you both have come under fire personally on a number of occasions. Talk to, as a lot of people in this room have, I think. So talk to people about how you deal with your critics.
This was a new experience for me this spring. You know, I had not been anywhere near the public eye, and I was quite content to lead my school. That was enough work, as it were. It was very challenging at first to start to read pretty mean and false things about the network, about my school individual, about me. Eva said, "Stop reading the blogs," which I could not do. But I think the way I got through it and continue to is that you just have to know, who are your real constituents, right? Ultimately, I am accountable to the kids in my building and their parents and my teachers. And every day I see that they are happy and they are engaged and everybody's improving. And so that's fine. You know, I think if you focus your eyes on the right kind of feedback, then you'll be able to make it through the rest of the noise.
Well, for me, it's three things that I try to pull on and keep in mind. One is my faith. And so I'm doing this. This is not about me. It's about something that's way larger and higher and bigger than me. And so I look at myself as a servant and everything that I'm doing. So I'll take the criticisms. I'll take the personal attacks because I know that at my core, for almost 25 years of my professional life, is that I want to serve children and families. Secondly, it is my family. I'm the youngest out of 7. And I know I always try to work on my non-regional diction, but as I've been talking, you probably know I'm from New Orleans. And being the youngest out of 7 and growing up in the Tremere area, my father didn't get to finish high school. He finished high school and learned a trade as an electrician, went to work, always worked 2 jobs all his life. And my mother, she didn't get to finish high school because her parents had gotten ill when she was in school, and being the eldest had to take care of her siblings. But they stressed like the single most important thing you can do is get a quality education. And some of us the 4 older siblings went to public schools in New Orleans for high school, but the last 3 of us, and this was the late 70s, they put us in private school, parochial school, and they scraped every penny they could for us to go there because the quality of public education had changed significantly in the 70s. But the single most important thing that I'm proud of with that is that all 7 of us have college degrees. And it wasn't because of wealth or influence. It was because of the design and determination within my household. And so I take that family mindset that, like, you're going to go to college. It was like, for me, being the youngest, it was like, that's going to happen. And so when my critics are at me, I'm fighting for those kids who may not have the parents that's giving them that belief, that's instilling that in them. And I feel like it's an imperative. And then lastly, it's the fight for the kids that I've taught. I had a young lady who I didn't actually teach her, but I was working at my church, and her grandmother came to me and asked, would I help her with her schoolwork? And so I worked with her, and the long story short was she was 11 years old, and when I gave her, a friend of mine gave her a basic literacy skills test called DIBELS. The child scored at the kindergarten level. She was reading on a 5-year-old level when she was 11. And in my mind, that's malpractice. I mean, the child had an IEP that wasn't an individualized education plan, that wasn't written to her level. And one of my members at the church that I attended at that time was the principal of the school. And I was like, in any other profession, licenses would be revoked. There'd be righteous indignation in saying, this cannot happen. So those 3 things, like, let me take any arrow, any bullet, anything, criticism, you could call me sellout, whatever, because I'm grounded in literally a personal, family, and professional belief that children can learn, they will learn, and that we have to hold to what we believe in. So at the end of the day, no matter what they say about me or our team, I know that we're grounded in the right thing. And that just keeps me moving. It's the people.
Let's turn to the audience and take some questions. And just raise your hand, and we have microphones right here. Can you guys see? Right there in the middle? They're coming.
Andy, this is for you. You've been quite inspiring. What are 5 concrete, specific things that other teachers and leaders can do to increase student performance? And I'm looking for really concrete, whether it's classroom management or instructional techniques or curriculum or extending the school day. What are the five things?
5 things. 1, fill the rooms with incredible literature at all grade levels. We have the most amazing books at Success Academy from kindergarten up, and the kids love reading because the books are so good. I mean, every favorite book from your childhood is in the libraries, and I really think that makes a huge difference. 2, leaders, in my opinion, should move away from lengthy written observation feedback, and everything should be done much more in the moment alongside teachers as it happens. Call it real-time coaching, call it what you will. If there's a problem with questioning, take over for 5 minutes, show them how it should be done, and then let them try it, and then debrief right then. I think that there's a real underestimation of the power of in-the-moment work in rooms. So that's 2. 3, let's see. Planning meetings. This is something we do at Success. Every week or twice a week, content teams meet and they study the material as adults, whether it's dissecting the poem or solving the problems, and we actually don't talk about how to teach it, we just talk about understanding it. And I think that that culture of intellectual engagement is very, very important. Number 4, invest the teachers in management and in active learning. I think that we are missing so many opportunities to improve results just by expecting that kids are focused and engaged and they're listening and thinking. We spend so much time the first 6 weeks of the year making sure that every teacher has the skills to get kids into the lesson and that they expect kids to listen and to learn. I think that that is very, very powerful. And often when I visit other schools, that's a difference that I notice. The amount of time on task and the amount of listening on task is not where I think it needs to be for real results. Number 5, so many to go with. I think that leaders need to understand how to communicate vision to their constituencies in a simple way. I'm a big fan of you envision what you want for the year or for the month, and you say it in 3 phrases. At Harlem Central, rigorous scholarship, rising talent, exemplary character. All of my feedback, all of the work is mapped back to one of those 3 phrases, and I think it really helps everybody understand what we're going for. And I think that that degree of investment in organization around a simple, clearly expressed but ambitious vision is very, very important to getting results.
So Campbell, I know you're our moderator, but I was hoping you could tell a little bit more about your story of what persuaded you to get involved in education reform, some of your coverage, and now with your new endeavor, with your new nonprofit, some of the personal attacks that have occurred, and your reactions to some of those things.
Sure. For me, it was pretty easy. I became a mother, and that will do it. It changes your perspective on everything. And I had 2 kids and was leaving CNN and had always been interested in education and covered it as much as I could at CNN. It was terrible for ratings. But I was at a moment in my life where I had to make a choice of sort of, was I going back to this world of television news, or was there something more that I could do beyond that? And having this platform, I felt there was a way to use it to help other families. I live in New York. I've been really lucky in my life. So my kids are going to get a great education, and I had so many friends who didn't have that same choice. And the inherent unfairness of that was sort of amazing to me, that we accepted it, and that I guess that there wasn't this urgency that you hear from Patrick and from Andy around solving this problem. And as I started writing and doing research around a lot of the issues, I mean, I started writing about the dismissal laws in New York and how screwed up they are, that we can have a teacher who has done crazy things and be sent back to the classroom. And it just was mind-blowing to me. I'll give you an example. This year, I have a first grader, and the day I took my first grader to school, I got a phone call from a mom who had found me through our website in Queens, who had a first grader who was going to PS 101 in Queens, and the parents had gone to drop their kids off, and they found out that their first grade teacher was this man, Richard Parlini, who had a history of physically and verbally abusing students. He had taken a little boy who had a stutter, and he brought him up to the front of the class and mocked him in front of the class and made this kid write on the chalkboard over and over again. I mean, and he had been found guilty, been given a $2,500 fine, and sent to anger management classes. And then they sent the guy back to teach first grade. That this isn't on the front page of every paper in this country blows my mind. That we're not talking about this every day amazes me. It really does. So these parents, we called all the newspapers, we called the television stations, they had a rally, and this guy is not teaching anymore. He's now on an administrative duty at the school, but he can't be fired, and legally, he has a right to teach that first grade class, which is astounding. So when I was following, I don't know if Felix Schein is still here, who worked on the California case, Vergara versus the state of California, where these families sued to challenge teacher tenure, these dismissal laws that protect these teachers and last in, first out seniority rules, and they won. Felix and I worked together at NBC News years ago, and so we had been talking. There you are. I remember having lunch with Felix a couple of years ago, and he started telling me about this case. I thought, God, this is fascinating what they're trying to do. And as we watched them progress, we began to look at whether this was something we could also do in New York. And so this summer, on behalf of 9 families now in New York whose kids are in public schools, failing public schools, we have helped them bring a lawsuit to do what they did in California and challenge these laws on constitutional grounds. And we are early in the process. The hearing on a motion to dismiss, the unions have intervened. They're trying to get the case thrown out, but that hearing is scheduled for January. And fingers crossed that we'll make progress. I would say, just as a journalist, I still consider myself a journalist at heart. Win or lose, what Vergara did and what this case hopefully will do is force a national conversation and make these issues front and center and get people who are not a part of this community, who are not a part of ed reform or living in this sort of bubble that I think we live in sometimes, who don't understand the way these laws work. If we can get a conversation going more broadly with the general public because of these litigation efforts and other things that people are doing, I think that would be so worthwhile, and trying to bring the conversation to the forefront, especially as we look at this next presidential campaign. Whatever's going to happen there, hopefully education will be an issue that really becomes the center of our discussion.
This question is for Patrick. You talked about the fact that many of the students that were graduating were scoring below the standardized test exam. Could you explain what it looked like when you walked into a classroom prior to the reform and now what it looks like after the reform?
Yes. So before, and I was a classroom teacher really around the state at that time, first 10 years of my career, you would see, unfortunately, in many classrooms, just students that aren't engaged. It was commonplace for students just to have worksheets and just, if a teacher was doing just a lot of lecturing and just, rote memorization of items and just really just a very drab, bland, a lot of just copying out of your textbooks, reading your textbook, and that sort of thing. Nothing outside of that. I think fast forward to today, what you see is just like great, robust learning environments where you see lots of students, and many students in schools where they're working at their own pace, depending on their ability levels. You see lots of engagement. You see lots of deep dives instead of just trying to cover a lot of content. They're really going deep into curriculum and content. You see places that are very lively. You see teachers that aren't just standing and lecturing, and rarely do you see students just sitting looking in textbooks and just doing worksheets, but it's a lot of hands-on, a lot of manipulatives, a lot of exploratory type of processes going on in the classroom. So I think from just a drab, I think visual, if you seem like you may be around like close to my age, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and they were like the classroom and the kids and just drooling and just boring and nothing engaging. That was like the average school, and now it's a very lively and different place.
Patrick can't see me, but I'm the chairman of the Senate Education Committee from Louisiana. Hey, Patrick.
Yes.
A little editorial comment. Patrick's very modest, and with all due respect to the other presenters, Patrick is the real deal. And you can't see the arrows in his back because he's facing towards, but he's full of arrows. And on behalf of the people of Louisiana and the children in New Orleans, I just wanted to thank Patrick Dobard for everything he does. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Appel, he's too kind, because without his leadership and courageousness, and I think, you as many policymakers here, he has just as many. But I think always being grounded, and I really appreciate you and the rest of our legislators who have been very supportive, because it's what you are grounded in and believe in. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this as well. Like, this is one of those things, and I think I'll just say it and be very authentic with you. As an African-American male in this, oftentimes you feel like from a visual, you're like in this outside place, and it's been characterized in a certain way. But I feel like what we do transcends all of that because of what we value and what we believe in. And when people are sincere and real, because they keep coming back to that. And I love what you said, Andy, about like the vision, and you keep it very simple. And I think that's what we've been able to do. So whether it's a Senator Appel or Representative Steve Carter, or the great leaders that we have in Louisiana, like while we may not look alike and we may not come from the same backgrounds, we are like brothers and sisters in arms around what we value and believe for our children, and that's what is allowing us to be successful. So I thank you all for that.
Patrick, can you talk a little bit about how the RSD, being an all-charter district, intersects with the statewide scholarship program?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing also, too, RSD is a statewide entity. So while we have all charter schools in New Orleans, we actually have 5 charter schools in Baton Rouge. We also have done where we've leveraged in small rural areas, and Campbell can really appreciate it, being a Louisiana girl herself, is that we've been able to leverage like small town politics where you have like down the street a B school, 2 blocks away you have a F school, which was a case recently. And what we did, we used the leverage of, we're not going to bring in a charter, but what you're going to do is close the F school and guarantee a seat for all the kids at the B school. And we did that, and a year later, that B did not drop, but maybe a percentage point or 2, and it was like 200 plus kids they took. And it's a great success story. So I think like it's not just a charter and strategy. Charter is just but a tool in the box to leverage quality options for kids. And I think the scholarship program is that as well. So we have students in New Orleans, and we have schools that are in our enrollment system. If they receive a state scholarship or a voucher from the state, they actually are in that enrollment system because it is like public funds. And so it's all about choices. So we have scholarship schools, the majority in New Orleans. We have our charter, all charters in the RSD, as well as the OPSB, that's the local school boards, traditional schools, and it works well. I think what we've done is that we've just defined what public education means, right? Usually in the past, when people say public education, I think we all have a visual, whether good or bad. But to me, it's the public's education system. So if you want to use state vouchers in order for a kid to get educated in a private school, I look at that as the public's dollars, as in taxes, and you should just be accountable for that to the public. And to me, public education can just mean different delivery systems. So it doesn't hurt us. It's actually good competition, because if we're doing what we're supposed to do, whether it's our charter schools, whether it's the voucher schools, parents should have those choices. So it fits very well in our value system, and I think it just helps everyone to kind of raise their game. Just think about it in New Orleans. It's like being great. We have many great restaurants, but people don't get upset that you have all this competition. If you're in Merrill, you better get it, because somebody might go to Brennan's and you want to keep your business. And so I keep making that. It's a lot of you can have these great options, and I think all of those are great options because they all push for choice.
Good morning. I'm Valencia Stovall from Georgia House of Representatives, and this is for the superintendent. What advice or strategy would you give in my relationships with my local school superintendent, who is not in favor of parent choice in my district?
I think a lot of it is just understanding then what is he in favor of. And so I would just ask him, right? And I mean that because I learned that a lot working particularly with some of the union leaders in Louisiana. While it's nothing like I think what y'all are facing in New York, I just got so perplexed that they could throw out the issues, but I'm like, okay, well, tell me what is it. So I would really sit and see, okay, if you're not for choice, then what is it that you're for? And then to me, it's then trying to find that road or that place where you can go together if it's something that you agree with. But I think sit down and find out what does he really value most? What's his vision to achieving that? And then maybe how can you work collectively towards that end if it fits in alignment with your value system?
We have time for one more.
I do not have a question, but I'd just like to add comment to the equation of poverty. I've worked at Texas Urban School and also Portland, Oregon Urban School, and what I had observed was that poverty is not just a poverty, but high percentage of student population living in a very unsafe environment with criminals, parents, and relatives who are engaged in crimes, and which makes children traumatized, and they are needing so much of the social services, and teachers having to do part of the parental work and the social workers' work takes away from instruction, and the Title I fund does not do anywhere near meeting the children's need. So what the school administrators end up doing was that if they do not qualify for SPED, but they are contributing to the failing status, then they try to drive those students out of the school community. And it's just a vicious circle round and round.
You guys want to comment?
Well, we work towards making certain that actually doesn't happen where students are being driven out. But I do agree with you that teachers are often challenged with having to deal with those things. But I think one of the great things about our schools and our school leaders, they've embraced that. That's another one of those ands. Yes, we have to deal with our students, and because they're chronically behind academically, and mom and dad is not involved, so I have to put some parental guidance in my school and classroom, and they haven't been served well from a health perspective, so I have to make sure that I get some eye screenings and hearing tests done in the school, and they emotionally have challenges, and so I have to figure out a way within my school to do that. But we as government, we are helping them with that, so they don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time, and we as a collective work together to provide solutions to that. I think what happened was, and I saw that in my first 10 years in the classroom, the teachers are like, oh, that's not my job. I'm not supposed to do that. You know, I don't have to do bus duty. And you know me, and I'm in there trying to teach young men how to shake hands and look someone in the eye, because their father might not be teaching them that, or no one around them, and understanding how to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. I remember we had one teacher who actually brought an etiquette video to show kids how to eat better in the cafeteria. And so it wasn't like, that's not my job, or, you know, hands are tied. Like, I love kids, and I'm going to figure out a way to get this done. So I think, and then also, we need flexibility with Title I. I would love to see it, like, you know, it's been shared out, get it as a block grant, and let those that are educating the kids just use it in a way that's going to help what their unique needs are. And so we have a lot of work to still do.
Andy, you want a quick comment?
Yeah, I think I would quickly add, you know, those challenges are very real. I love everything that you said. I think from a school leader's perspective, it's important not to underestimate ensuring that your building culture is just permeated with love and joy and humor in addition to rigor. I think you can't underestimate the power of a collective, consistent culture that nurtures happiness and good character can go a long way in helping kids feel that they are supported despite whatever challenges they're facing outside of the building walls.
Patrick, Andy, thank you so much. Thank you.